Welcome to Freshwave. Welcome to Freshwave. Welcome to Freshwave. Welcome to Freshwave.
I forgot about this. So again, years ago, I worked for a company called Eduneering in Princeton, New Jersey, and we were primarily making like online education for like the workforce, like our clients, like the FDA and other government agencies. So a good part of my job was like going into a room and just like playing video games, Zelda, studying UI and menus and how to adapt that to our our at the time Flash interactives. So in my research, I came across this one new game called America's Army. Right. Well, it was my introduction, my first introduction to like a modern. Before Call it, I mean, like I played those other ones afterwards because this got me hooked. And I probably played those other times, sparsely, but I wasn't really into it. But what really got me hooked was America's Army. It was totally free, amazing graphics at the time. I still, look. I got to find a copy of it to see if it's still out. But and I started playing it. It was like after a few plays, getting hooked on it. Then I realized it was actually put out by the U.S. Army as a recruiting
Yep.
tool, and I was like, whoa. And I was like, no one's talking about this. Yeah, like I think it was no one. I was like, wow, man. I said that's like, I was hard, deep in advertising at the time. I was like, that's so devilishly brilliant. It's like recruiters again. Recruitment for the Army has always been, an issue, especially in peace times. So they usually appeal to, hey, Ash.
Hey.
Ashley's joining us, event
what's
coordinator for Freshwave. And we're just we're going through a few things about, tech, children in tech and our concerns. And what we're on now is video games, and what can what can we do? Like what the existing games, and we're kind of, meandering a little bit into some anecdotal stories about, I was talking about America's Army and how it was used as a recruitment tool. In early 2000s, it was an FPS game like Call of Duty, but very well done. But in the game, if you qualify in certain skills, they would prompt you, "Hey, you're pretty good," and you would actually have to You would go through basic training. Not everybody can be like I think it was like a paratrooper. You had to qualify, but it was all by their standards. It was kind of like pre indoctrinating these kids playing these games into like what it'll be like, and that's all. Again, that's a dope recruitment tool. That's better than any pamphlet. That's better than any recruitment officer kind of giving you a cell. It brings you into the world. I got hooked on it, and I just thought it was mad effective. But these are, again, with every dope technological innovation, I just think it's, as educators, we have to kind of like present the other side, but not just the other side, but like a solution. These are the kids gonna play. I mean, abstinence doesn't work. Like we're going back to early in our conversation on any level. Abstinence education just doesn't work because of human nature. So,
hey, so Ashley, before I ask this question, I want to ask just a identifying question. Is it safe to say that you identify as a Black woman from Philadelphia?
Yes, I would identify as a Black woman from Philadelphia.
Awesome. So, from a matter of perspective, and quick tangent, asking this because sometimes, when you think about internet or whatever it may be, we mentioned propaganda earlier, and sometimes reputations create barriers. So, from your perspective, when you hear gaming, what are your general thoughts, and also how do your family and friends around you, how do you think they perceive gaming as a general topic?
That's a good question, actually. Um, Gaming with all. So I was born in the '90s. So, and my sister had she had a Nintendo, I believe, or Sega. So it was like gaming was always like a console, like what you do, like kind of physically, but in some type of universe that you can just throw your mind into. So when I hear gaming, I always think of like, I don't know, something that is physical, but is also within like a console. I always think of a console.
Yeah, and do you have young family members who are into console games?
Absolutely. I know so many people. I'm actually late. I should get the PS5. I don't think there's a PS6 out yet, but everyone has them. But it's really weird because when I think about gaming too, like I think about all of the vulnerabilities as well that comes with gaming now because things have evolved so much too. Um, but yeah.
Do you play? I
Right.
mean, like, what's the last game you played, either on like mobile or on a console?
So I have played a game. It was like an adventure game where you're just like walking around in the forest, and then you can like kill people and ride on horses, and then jump in the car. Well, no, there's no cars. It's like a ancient game.
World of
Um,
Warcraft.
I don't think it was World of Warcraft. I don't believe it was that.
Oh,
But that's one of those really, games with the vulnerabilities. I hear a bunch of crazy stuff, with World of Warcraft. That was like one of those games that was hacked like crazy, like the
mhm.
most.
Interesting. And the young people that you know who do play, how is it treated in their household? Is that like a extracurricular, like after school weekend activity for them, or are there any restrictions that their guardians put around gaming that you know of?
Absolutely. So it's more of a whenever. So I have a lot of younger cousins, and I have a lot of friends who have children as well. So I'm oftentimes around young people, and they are able to play their consoles pretty much whenever. There's no real restrictions. It's just as long as there's no better or needed work, like, chores or schoolwork, then, they're pretty much off to the races. They can do whatever they want to do.
Do-
Right. I'm sorry, and just real quick, I'm assuming that's very much from a recreational standpoint, I'm guessing, or assuming.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That is the recreational part, I guess, in this scenario that I'm presenting.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's answering that question, but usually it is in a recreational capacity in that frame.
have you come across or any parents' opinions about how much recreational activity they're spending on their games? Is that something that you hear, or is it?
You know what's so interesting about that? I'm oftentimes the person who presents the question to the parents. And I think it's from a biased perspective because I don't have children myself. So I'm usually the one that's asking, like, hey, and they never really have answers, but there are some parents that I do know that their uh, children are probably older, maybe like
Mhm.
closer to college age, maybe 19, 20. They have already kind of figured it out and have their process. So they're like, yeah, um, maybe once they hit high school, they have certain restrictions, right? Because they see that it's affecting their schoolwork or maybe their mental, or so it does sometimes become like, getting into that universe is probably affecting, that child a certain way. So, they put parameters and restrictions around
I hope
things, and
so.
and
Yeah,
they've learned, yeah, they've learned. But with younger, it's different.
I
Yeah.
think that's fascinating that you know create that spectrum is one that I don't think we laid out, but how games are perceived from the parent or guardian. So it seems like
Yeah.
there's two ends of, let's call it, the negative or um, just negative perspective, but one end that says, okay, you got parents that might try to hyper police and limit interactions with the games because they already view it as harmful. But then you
Yeah.
have other parents who are kind of unaware
Yeah.
and treat it as
Absolutely.
this irrelevant thing. It's like it's just something that the kids do. They're
Right.
unengaged. But both of those type of engagement processes are counter to the idea and essentially missing the fact that, well, there may be a career opportunity here,
Right.
and if I engage with the child and see what they like about it and see if there's learning opportunities, that's a
Right.
way to make that you know, a positive and also valuable interaction instead of just recreational and time wasting.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. It's actually funny too because like thinking about like when people were first talking about like technology and computers, it's always like, oh, don't keep looking at the TV because it'll hurt your eyes. Like, you know, like maybe you should read a book, right? Like, so
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes I think about it like that. Sometimes, like, there are still people who think about it that way. Like, and that's a very legitimate way to think about it. So even if it's like making a career out of it, you have to make some type of change, physiological, I guess, change.
Yeah. I think it's my bias too. Again, being so long and working in advertising, I kind of see something. I see branding as just communication, and just kind of creating a story around it, and it's like trying to
Yeah.
supplant the existing story about. Because the reason I'm pushing on gaming so hard is because look at spatial, right? If they're going to put this technology in front of the kids, right? And if we don't include the parents walking on the kid, and it's like this looks like another game to them. Like no, mom, I'm on Freshwave. I'm learning about tech. Get off that damn game.
Right, 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 right,
Right.
right, exactly.
But you know, I think it's cool that Ashley, you brought up the idea of how people pair screens versus books, right? Where
Right,
you know, illiteracy is still very much a real thing. This is something that
right.
I'm learning to accept. I'm realizing, like, no, it's a lot of people are still illiterate, particularly here in Philadelphia. But the interesting thing about games is, for most games that you play, you have to know how to read.
Oh
Right,
yeah,
You
exactly.
a lot of
absolutely
reading.
have to know how to read. So if that's not a motivator, I don't know what is.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
I think
right.
I think again, it's really just. I mean, it sounds corny, but again, old schools mesh with the new school sometimes work. Back in the day, you had potato sack races, right? You have your dad that worked a lot. Didn't have time for his son, but when they had the company picnics and you had the potato sack race, that was a time for the father and son to compete together. So it's like
Right,
bringing
Listen,
parents into the world and like compete, like creating situations where yeah, fathers, parent, parent, child gaming, and various types of games. I think that could be a good tool that maybe
yo,
something we
right.
can do.
some of my best young memories with my dad is beating him in Madden. Like just being a young child in that first game where it's like, oh, I finally beat my dad. Like that's a moment.
You know what though? I, like so I have nephews again that they're definitely like deep, and I mean you gotta pull them out. You gotta pull them out for air. Wash your behind, son. Get off the game.
Right. And
Um,
then, right, it become that opposite moment too, because kids, they might already be nice, but when the father get his glory, like, oh, I finally beat my kid, it's the same
oh
thing.
yeah, every
Reinforcement, like, yo,
time.
I'm the daddy here.
Every time I got a deep rivalry with my nephews that go back to it's like I'm a grown man. It's pathetic, but I get so much joy of beating him because it's so rare.
That's hilarious.
So it's
Because
so
it's
rare
so rare.
that I have to
Listen,
do
I
the
tell you,
dance.
I got an 8-year-old little cousin who reminds me all the time that I cannot see him in Fortnite, and he's correct.
Yeah,
One day, though, that's one of my goals.
that lost me. I was like, you know what? My brain just doesn't work like this. I can't shoot. I
Right.
can't shoot and build a fort at the same time. I don't know what.
So
Yeah,
These
like
kids be
that's
like
a
built
thing,
like
you know.
skyscrapers in seconds. I'm like, yo, what? I'm still trying to figure out the
Dude.
menu. Like, how do I put
Right,
doors?
like seriously, it gets very evolved. Like some of these games I can't even keep up with. Like I still just like Mortal Kombat and racing games. Like I will play Need for Speed, I swear. And
Yeah,
I
I
will
love
beat
Need
you
for
at
Speed.
that. Exactly. And I will be so happy. I'll be like, yes, I won, you know, and it's so basic.
Yo,
When
but solid points. I will say, like, if you talk about hand-eye coordination, listen,
Right.
building a fort and shooting a target is not
That's
easy.
crazy.
I've tried it. I cannot do it. It's one or the other for me. I'm either building the fort or I'm shooting the target.
I noticed,
Right.
I noticed with my daughter, the game that was like, none of that was no real gaming. Only when the Nintendo Wii came out.
Mm,
That's when, because it's just mainly social games.
right.
So a
The
big
social
one that I hope to God there's no video, but knowing my children, it probably is, of us playing Dance Dance Revolution for hours. Miley Cyrus Rihanna songs, it got me in some very suspect dance moves. But it was, but it was like bonding. But it's like memories, right? It's like that is part of our family memories, because like my mom was in it, so their grandmother, we whole family would be into it, right? And that was, so that's
I like
Shout out
positive
to that real
technology.
quick. Same thing. My family, shout out to my cousin Keita, who had made a tradition of playing Dance Dance Revolution at like the New Year's parties. Like she became
Woo!
New Year's
nice.
host.
That sounds
But
like a
you're
good
right.
time.
Like moms, cousins, aunts, from baby up to the oldest, all had a chance to engage around these games,
Yep.
which was super cool.
That again. So again, we's are easy to get,
Right.
and that could be.
I think that education part is very key too, absolutely, because I think that irony, you know, so it's so funny that you said that because, all right, I just wanted to go back to what you said, Daishan, about the irony of there having to be so much technicality behind this stuff that may not seem, like, oh, for play. When you bridge that whole building a fort, they're doing things that are very involved, and you're
Yeah.
putting some type of mental activity into that, and then bridging that and being like that same person could actually be illiterate. It's very interesting, right?
Hmm.
So it's just like bridging that connection is very, I think, important to like what we are also about, right? So I think that's the
Amazing.
thing,
Yep.
like like bring it back to education, the career paths, like that's very important because it caters to each other.
Yeah.
100%.
What games do well and what they've evolved to do was share being able to communicate and share um, extreme amount of information very efficiently in a way that for popular
Mm,
games everyone can understand. So going back to, I was telling you that I was trying to work for a company called Engineering, where I was playing games for research purposes to figure out how to take some of these lessons from gaming over to like education, basically. Like, how can, I'm playing a Legend of Zelda game and there's so much involved, but I'm in it, right?
right,
I'm going to the fairy is telling me to do this, and I learned this new move, and I learned a combination of moves. I'm like, well, this could be applied to anything, you know,
right.
to anything. So it's still a huge potential, I think, in games that haven't been like there hasn't been. It's not a permeable wall between um, education and games that's been consistent. You know,
Right, that's a good point, actually. I mean, it all has to sell, right?
yeah,
It's all about money
yeah,
at
because
the
it
end of the
costs a lot to
day.
make these things, yeah, and so
Well,
it's
and it's funny. It's just there's a natural alignment between gaming and education as well, because whether they realize it or not, education is built on a gamified model. You
mm,
have to
Right,
go through courses, complete certain packets to
exactly.
earn a certain grade to advance to the next level. It's already a game. Uh,
yeah.
Right. No, that's a good point. That's a really
you
good point.
know,
We should see.
so if you pair that with just the virtual and the interactive aspects of what video games are, we might be on to something.
Yeah. We should see if we can get a copy of the educational version of Assassin's Creed. Have you heard of that?
Really?
Funny, I have heard of that because they spend so much time on the historical detail that they were able to create a model that took the killing out and just left
Yeah.
the oratory and
wow.
historical aspects in it.
Yeah, I remember playing it and thinking that, and then they came out with that, and I was like, wow, this could be. And but I think there's certain parameters as an educator you have to kind of like, in order to get that copy. But I think as Freshwave, I think we qualify to get a copy of the demo.
Wow.
But yeah, it's a. I mean, they spend. I mean, I think also again on the career side of things, looping back to the kids. I don't think people understand how much these things generate. And we have a tendency to push our kids into, like, as far as creative fields like music, hoping that, they'll become the next big thing. But it's much more lucrative to try to get capital to design a game. You'll get richer quicker that way.
Oh, absolutely. There's government contracts being given to game designers because, there are places where it fits in. But as you was just talking about the Assassin's Creed educational model, something clicked where it was like, yo, something as simple. There's certain subjects that we look at in the education system as being trivial or sometimes less than practical in daily life. And history is one of those topics, right? And it's not to say that we shouldn't know history, because we absolutely should, but how much school hours is spent on it is questionable if you're not having transferable work skills from it. So imagine a model where you go to school and most of your classes are practical skills, maybe something like accounting or some sort of trade, English, because you got to know how to read and write or type or whatever. Mm-hmm. But you get an additional course assignment that says, all right, you do have to have a certain understanding, workable knowledge of history, but to earn your history credits, you just play these games.
Yeah.
And if you complete these games, we'll know that you got to work in understanding. Because when you play Assassin's Creed, you're learning the history while you're playing the game. Everyone knows the story of the game that they're playing. So put history class or Shakespeare or whatever else that don't need to be spent in the classroom, put it in a game and let them do it on their own time.
All right, that is a very good point, actually. That's really
I think there's a prejudice against, like, books, because books are one of our oldest technologies, so much so that we don't recognize it as a technology, that a book is a piece of technology, that it's translating information into glyphs and symbols that we then absorb. So when we're absorbing information, there's like, that a brain has to do a certain amount of processing to decipher, right? But again, if you lose your sight, and you read by braille, which is a different sensation, which is touch, your brain is still getting the information, right? But you're not reading per se. Take it to audiobooks, right? Okay, not your hands, your touch, but your ears. If you listen to an audiobook, are you getting a less of an understanding of the book if you use your eyes? So let's take it to games. If you're immersed in the history, right, and you're experiencing it, is it any less vital and any less meaningful than if you actually read it in a book?
I think
I'd argue that you'll learn it faster.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Like some people learn differently though. Yeah. Like some people learn faster, some people learn slower with that. And it's like how you intake that type of information.
Right.
So it's funny because games actually already designed for that. So you know how when you play these RPG quest games, it's a lot of storytelling, right? And a lot of narration. And what do they have? They have a button where you could click and you can read this scroll, or you could just listen to them read it to you. Two different types of users, but the options are both there.
Yeah.
Right. I wanted to ask you about that. So I had to look up that Assassin's Creed educational version because I am just I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is the fact that it's educational the fact that there's no guns? Because that's the way that you kind of presented it. You're like, it's educational. It doesn't have any, well, not guns, but no shooting or killing people, I believe.
Yeah, they take out the knives. They really just kind of just like, because if you played the game and you get into it, I mean, it encourages you. I mean, if you kill someone, there are consequences to like gameplay and things like that. So on the coding side of things, you can't. You can. The joy is breaking those rules, but
Okay.
most of it is understanding the story. Therefore, understand because it's all based on. I mean, they kind of bring in like Illuminati and stuff like that, but it's all bringing in actual
Okay.
historical places. Like the one about Egypt is. I mean, which I think the educational version is like beautiful. So it's like
Yeah.
you can take kids on a field trip of ancient Egypt in
I
its
see.
prime.
Okay.
Like
So it's a lot more than just the
yeah,
non-film
all
killing.
these games are like
Okay.
Red Dead Redemption. Like the gaming part of it is the the draw. It means like the hook. But when people are really the people that are really hardcore dedicated to these games, they know the lore. They know like this game inside out. They go buy books about it.
Right, because there's
You
like
know,
stories behind it, but you can like skip those things, right? Like you can just
Right.
skip through it and just kind of not pay attention to the
yeah,
story
you
that's
choose
actually happening.
right. Yeah, so it's like
Right.
yeah, so
But you could like in an educational model, like you could code it where you can't skip those things.
yeah.
But
Oh,
if you go on YouTube now, there's actually probably for every video game with a story mode, you can find a YouTube video with only the cutscenes, and people watch those straight through like mini movies.
oh yes, you're right. I do know about that. You're right about that.
Yeah. So it's cool. I actually I did the Google search as well for Assassin's Creed, their educational mode.
Mhm.
And they actually rebranded it. So they actually called that Discovery Tour. But essentially what it
Oh,
is
that's what
Assassin's
this is.
Creed
I see.
without the assassins. Yeah.
All right, so here's some stats. Before we're going to move from this to blockchain just for a little bit, talk about that and kids. But again, the reason why we're spending so much time on video games is because again, VR and gaming, web gaming, even in blockchain, a lot of the popular apps are gaming based. Some would say gambling based. But as far as
Yeah.
the market, where we at? Okay. Um,
That's like a lot of where the War of Warcraft stuff, like it came in the assets, like people trying to like manipulate the assets and steal people's coins or whatever. Because I never really played World of Warcraft. I just heard a lot about it. But yeah, I think that's where a lot of the hacking, like I was talking about before, comes in. So just a segue there, because I was, that's a very huge
mhm,
topic right now for sure.
Yep. So right now, games generate the 180 billion. This is up from this one chart I'm looking at, which was in 2018, which was 101 billion. With film, all film digital sales, box office sales are 49 billion is globally, and for music, what is that? 16 billion. So we're talking about 180 billion versus, I mean, like in these other industries, like in that, there's a lot of jobs, traditional jobs, and all sorts of things from graphic design to programming to music to dance to
That's what those numbers
filmmaking.
represent, you're saying?
Yeah, like the video game market is worth 180 billion dollars,
Oh, wow.
180 billion as of 2021. And I can't find the numbers on movies on film, but on this old chart from 2019, the numbers they had was 101 billion for video
Oh,
games. That includes PC, console, and mobile games.
mm,
49 billion for film. That's digital and box office sales. That includes all of Netflix, all the streaming services, of all the movies that
mm,
drop. It's worth it generates less than half what video games generate, and then
right.
music generates 16 billion, so not even half of film. So it's like
Sheesh. Wow. Those
it's
are interesting numbers. And those are careers that are available in
I mean that's what
gaming.
the industry is worth, like comparatively. So
Oh, the
you
industry careers.
yeah,
I'm so
if
sorry.
you weigh that as far as just like again, so that means that with huge markets comes huge opportunities for people to kind of build these AAA games, which sometimes require hundreds of people, at a time, from which kind of includes some of the same people that um, come from the other two industries, film and music. So I think
Right.
that's a selling point just for parents, concerned about again, I don't think that's talked about like how big video games are, how much goes into the production of them as actual, um, not just media objects, but pieces of art, pieces of creativity.
Well, I want to throw a question to you, Anthony, because Ashley brought up the exact question or thought that came to my mind. And it's like, all right, well, we hear these revenue numbers about what the industry as a whole brings in.
Mm-hmm.
But when we talk about career opportunities, let's always be realistic with our
Mhm.
people.
Yeah.
All of your children or all of you aren't going to be the video game owner,
No.
producer, or production company, or even the developer themselves. But as you mentioned, different career access points. So,
Right.
from the top of your mind, what's like some of those careers that are reachable and obtainable for youth?
Programmers of all kinds. Games are mostly programming. Engineers to develop the architecture and sets for these games. Or like maybe like the primary, like they're looking for, always looking for coders, always looking for 3D developers because that's the raw material that makes a game. But also, you can't make a game without writers,
Writers,
storyboard
I was
artists,
just thinking about the art side,
yeah,
like the visuals and the
yeah,
story, right?
storyboard artists, conceptual artists, which a lot of times are either digital or traditional painters to design backgrounds and paint backgrounds for games, depending on their look. A good one is CupHead. Yeah, Cuphead is a super dope game. I'll probably add some B-roll of it right here as we talk. But Cuphead is a game developed by two friends. Um, and there's actually, you know what? There's actually a couple of dope documentaries I'm gonna play right after our conversation. And I can't remember the name of them, but there's two documentaries about independent designers making video games and their success. Again, you're talking about like 2 or 3 person companies at the time, and one independent game, pays their mortgages. Like it's not making them super rich, but it's taking them out of the.
It's a living.
It's a living. Like they're making pretty good money. As far as big.
So as you were going through those different like career spaces, I'm already envisioning like if you got that child that doodles and sketchbooks and plays video games all day, they might be a future storyboard artist for video games.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah, there's so many possibilities with that. I oftentimes think about how different people who consider themselves creatives and artists, like in terms of writers and people who create things, do they always have to have that technical aspect or that technical, is tech really embedded into everything to that degree,
So I would love to take that layup right there and highlight the fact that I am a founder of a tech company. However, I do not know how to code. I'm what they call a non-technical founder. And that's very real because you need idea people as well. So I actually compare the tech industry to the music industry. It's like sometimes you have a singer, sometimes you have a songwriter, sometimes you have a producer. Sometimes you have special people that do all three, but that's rare.
Right.
Normally it's a team, and the tech world works the exact same way. You normally have a non-tech founder, and that's someone who's a visionary. They engage with audiences. They do the marketing, bring in the publicity,
Right.
and dream up ideas. And then you have a technical founder who goes back and makes it work.
Yep.
Right, absolutely. No, that's a really good point. Actually, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's not. It's always. It's a group effort. Like as the game that I dropped, the movie that I dropped into the chat it's called Indie Game, the movie. You'll see what happens when you're a singular person. You try to produce even a simple game. Like it's very very difficult. It's very very hard because again, if you're just a programmer and you're trying to write a game, then you have to become a story. You have to become a writer as well.
So that's amazing. It kind of brings the conversation
interesting.
full circle because we
Right.
touched on how when you're a player in the game, the way that games are being modeled now is all about group play. You're playing online, you're playing on a team with strangers, so you have to learn how to work together. But guess what? It works the exact same way in making a game.
Yeah.
It's a team effort. You have to work with different people from different places, learn how to work together to accomplish a single goal. And that's a lesson that will remain valuable through, I believe, human existence.
I think that's actually going to go, add that little dollar right into our workshop. I think that gave me an idea about how to approach the gaming workshop. you know,
Mm.
I think I was thinking about initially like each child makes their own game, but it should be collaborative. Not
Yes,
every yeah,
absolutely. Everything
not every
about
child,
it
yeah.
should be.
So
Yeah.
structure the lesson in that way where you have
And it could even be conceptual as well. Like, we may have some coders there, but at the same time, like if you have a team that could come together and storyboard a concept for a game, that's as equal of a valuable skill as being able to develop the game, because now you put
Right.
yourself in a position where you could go and sell a product or sell an idea and build a company around your ideas.
Welcome to Freshwave. Welcome to Freshwave.